Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Kati Kleber, and today we're talking about a super interesting topic, AI in nursing. What is this gonna look like? I don't know. I really don't know. And I talked to somebody and I'm really excited to share her perspectives. So I sat down with Ali Morin. She's a board certified nurse with her master's degree with a focus in informatics. We talked about that a little bit too, for those of you interested in informatics. Um, she has more than 20 years of experience in healthcare IT. She is currently the Chief Nursing Informatics Officer at Symplr, where she helps shape technology and how that supports nurses. She's worked on everything from EMR optimization to staffing solutions, and she's a national leader in guiding digital health strategies for nurse leaders. So I'm so excited about this conversation. I think AI is very cool. And I'm definitely someone who is like, if I can use tech to make my everyday better, but not lose the human side of it, love it. Here's one quote I wanted to share with you. She said, AI can never replace the human touch, but it can absolutely take work off your plate. Hello. Yes, please. I would love that. So before we jump in, I do want to update you on two quick things. If you are looking at a nursing program, whether that's LPN, RN, BSN, DNP, MSN, PhD, all the things, nurse practitioner, I am making lots of guides. I'm making lots of resources to help people navigate that process. And to kind of put it all together, I made a nursing school planning workbook. So you can put all the schools that you're interested in considering, and you put them there. You can rate them. Here's the tuition. Here's what this offers. Double check that they're board approved and accredited and all that kind of stuff. It will keep you organized, help you compare options, and make you make a confident decision that's not just based on, this school gives me the warm fuzzies. This is the best logical decision for my massive financial and time investments, because I want you to make good, smart choices, and I hope that will empower you. You can find that at freshrn.com/planner. Also, if you are one of those lovely people who's prepping for the NCLEX, I wanted to share that one of my favorite resources, TrueLearn, has upped my discount. So they used to give my readers a 15% discount. Well, they upped that bad boy to 20. So if you use promo code FRESHRN whenever you check out at TrueLearn, and that can be on the NCLEX products, then you can get 20% off. Okay. They have other things that you can use my discount for, but it might be a 15 to 20%. So if you're doing like the health medical assistant, you can get a discount on that. If you're doing the NP certification exam, you can get a discount on that too. Just put in fresh RN. Let's see what happens when you go to your, just go check out. And I just updated my blog post on my favorite NCLEX programs. I used to have 8 that I recommended. Now I have 3. TrueLearn is on that list. So I will put a link to that blog post and guide in the description of this episode for you to check out. All right, let's go ahead and get into the conversation with Ali. So, Ali, thank you so much for joining us on the Fresh RN podcast. I'm very excited to talk to you both about AI and about your informatics background. So, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, okay, I want to start off by getting a little bit of a baseline of how AI is just even used in patient care today. Because, if you're a student, or if you're someone who's not like working with patients directly, maybe you use ChatGPT or use AI in maybe a very non-clinical way. How is it even being utilized at all right now in a clinical capacity?
Yeah, there's definitely there's broad ideas and implementations are in process for a lot of things. So primarily the initial focus is in the electronic medical record areas. So what kind of documentation could be automated? What kind of medication safety rules could be put into place? For a long time there were decision support rules in the background of the EMR. I mean, you could call that AI, right? It was taking documentation from here, documentation from there, and saying, hey, these don't align. This patient might be at risk for sepsis. You might want to look at the rest of the chart and see if there's something out there. So, I mean, we've been doing machine learning in the EMRs for a long time, but now there's much more forward thinking about how the documentation can aid in freeing up time for nurses. There's also a lot around fall preventions, right? So how can those sensors that we're putting and the mats that we're putting on beds and the alarms that are on beds, how can that start remembering those events and start trying to capture that and maybe have a little bit more forward thinking, so that the nurses can take preventative measures before a fall happens in a room. So those are kind of some initial things. We're certainly at Symplr looking at how we're going to put AI out in front of some of the automation into our solutions as well, to just really take out that administrative burden that people are experiencing across a number of solutions.
Yeah, I mean, that's like music to a nurse's ears, right? Like the administrative. I mean, I saw you guys had that report, that Compass survey that said 85% of clinicians are losing an hour daily on administrative tasks. And I honestly feel like it's proud. I felt like I was losing more than an hour. And when you're working minute to minute, that is massive over a 12-hour shift. So to have AI kind of like take care of that stuff, especially within documentation, like pulling things places so I don't have to drag them. Like,
And don't make me log into a bunch of places to do a similar thing in this solution and that solution and another solution, right? So where can I bring forward and through technologies and solutions, patient data, sign-in information, staffing data, like being able to be more thoughtful around those connections across, platform opportunities and technology is really important. I mean, that 85% is no joke of wasting an hour. And then you think about who are those people, right? So we focus really heavily on the nurse manager and the nurse leaders and the importance of them not having the time to really empower their nurses, right? So I always say nobody went to school to spend time charting in the EMR, and no nurse manager became a nurse manager to have to deal with fall reports in this system and staffing and scheduling in that system and calling off in that system, right? So how do we make sure that we're enabling that kind of streamlining for their workflows, and how can AI do a lot of that work for them?
man, that would be so so beneficial. There's just so much wasted time. And I feel like a lot of the wasted time is like there's processes and new software, like all these different things. And it's like the end user is almost always the nurse, but the person
For 24 hours
purchasing,
a day.
yeah. And the person purchasing the product and maybe facilitating the training doesn't have to use it every day and doesn't have to pull all these pieces together. And the nurse just, okay, just figure it out. Log into 12 different things and somehow have a cohesive picture of your patient and be able to get through a shift. And it's like, I don't know, I guess my perfect world is almost like, your iPhone, it has all these apps, but it's one iPhone. It's not 17 different phones, right? Or different things that you use all day. It would be lovely for a nurse to be able to just have a centralized thing.
That's why I am such a proponent of the magnet culture and shared governance models in organizations, and allowing those bedside clinicians to have a voice in decision making, right? So to your point, IT is they're responsible for the budget. They're responsible for making sure the software is secure and safe, and users have access. But from a what's the right solution to put in front of nurses? You need nurses to be enabled and empowered to have that voice. And so I believe strongly in the magnet culture. And I also believe real strongly in the work that AONL is doing around digital transformation for nurse leaders. So historically, nurse leaders are so focused on patient care, and they're so focused on their staff and their outcomes. The technology sometimes takes the back seat, and we're really working to elevate the voice and educate the nurse leader to become more comfortable and competent around technology, so they can say, time out, you realize this is the 13th system that you're asking my nurse to log into at the beginning of their shift. Is that really getting the benefit for the ROI of this solution? And I think that's where a lot of the AI conversation comes into play, because everybody's got AI now, but who's being thoughtful about how, when, and where to introduce AI? And I think that's really something that we could talk about a little more is how do you dive into the right places for AI to be introduced and when?
Yeah, because I'm sure there's an aspect of there's low-hanging fruit of like, okay, we could implement AI in these things and it would change things quickly and for the better, but then there's probably bigger, massive things that would take a lot more, but would also be extremely beneficial. What are some of those things, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, we're taking it Symplr, we're taking it very slow and we're being fast followers and we're really being thoughtful about where's the pain point in the workflow, where's the pain point in the solution that people are experiencing. And we're giving them the confidence that the AI is accurate, right? So we have a couple of solutions that have AI phase one implemented or are soon to be implemented, where we're really getting those end users. I won't lie, they're still doing comparison, right? They're still saying, well, this is how I did it before, and this is the list I came up with. AI is telling me this is the list. Okay, it's pretty close. I'm starting to trust. Trust is a huge thing
Yeah.
with AI. I'm starting to trust it. And I think there's a lot of concerns around trust with AI, and they're not wrong. It's because maybe they're not part of the decision making about what AI solutions are there to go in, and they may not believe that it's actually going to get the outcomes that the vendor is saying they're going to get from it. So, us nurses, we're a little skeptical sometimes, and our best interest is ourselves and our patients and our patient safety. And so it's important for us to make sure that we've got the buy-in from them, that the solution we have is going to give them a benefit.
Yeah, I mean, I can see nurses being very like nurses are just hesitant with change in general. Wait, that's not the way we've always done central line dressing changes. I'm not, what do you mean there's a lit review? I don't care. That doesn't make sense to, you know what I mean? No, that doesn't make sense,
Show me
but
the
like,
evidence.
right, show me the evidence. And then even when you show me the evidence, I'm
Yeah,
not sold. But then, yeah, there is that aspect of like liability. What if AI tells me to do something
yeah,
wrong and there is a
right.
flaw and there's, how am I going to be, I'd rather trust not, I'm sure you need to trust, but also like trust but verify, trust but also don't allow it to curtail your critical thinking because it's not a replacement for that. And I could see like older generation, and speaking to myself when I say that, like being very hesitant to trust, but then brand newbies trusting too easily. And like
Yeah.
how do we do that in a cautious way with implementing these different things?
Yeah, and Katie, that you bring up a good point. I mean, we are dealing with five generations of nurses taking care of patients today.
Whew.
And so
I
when
didn't
you
realize that.
we talk about this internally, we believe our product is the best product and it's going to solve everybody's problems. But the reality is we have nurses who still have their binder for their schedule, right? They have a
Mm.
little like 12 by like little 4x6 folder. And I'm saying my friends do this today still. They write down their shifts in that. They're not going to open a mobile app and schedule themselves. They're on a piece of paper. And then to your point, you've got the digital natives who just ordered DoorDash and scheduled their 6 week schedule in the same 5 minutes. And they're
Yes.
perfectly content. And that's what they expect.
Hmm.
So when you're talking AI and you're talking technology, we have to be able to adapt to all those generations. And whatever we're putting out there needs to be amenable, because otherwise we're going to fail. We always say fail fast, but we're going to learn real quick that we did the wrong thing and we got to pivot fast so that we're not becoming one of those, well, I don't trust it because it didn't do what I thought it was going to do.
Hmm. Hmm. Are there any like highly clinical, like not just like charts and things, but like on medical equipment that AI is being used, like I'm even like in the ICU or something where I'm being trialed or like looking at it in a highly clinical capacity?
There's really cool AI tools for like stroke. So you think about a patient comes in with a rule out stroke, or a patient comes in with, rule out STEMI. You put them in the scanner and AI can find out very, very quickly, not only whether the patient actively has a stroke, it can communicate to the right team of people based on the patient's clinical diagnosis. So that's just one that comes right to the top of my head. That's really, really interesting. It's a personal story for me. My dad had a hemorrhagic stroke in 2019. Decent outcome, but my goodness, if that was in place, it would have been a much quicker decision tree about who needs to be contacted to get him into the OR or not, you know? So real life and death kind of things like that are definitely out there, and everybody on the medical device side is trying to figure out where do we put it. But medical devices also come with 510K certification from the FDA, so there are a little bit more hoops to jump through when you're thinking about medical devices at the bedside.
Yeah, that makes sense. And but when you're talking about like stroke algorithms and stuff, when we're talking emergency department nurses and ICU nurses, there are so many algorithms. And I remember after a 12-hour shift, like can barely keep my eyes open and I'm going through this like complicated, like, all right, their lactate was this, their potassium was this. Uh, okay, this is like those kinds of things being like automated by
Yeah.
AI and double checked by a nurse or
Yep.
two or however that might work.
Yep.
Lord bless that technology. That would be amazing. Is something like that already being implemented for
Absolutely.
nurses at the bedside? Oh,
Absolutely. Yep. That's the kind of stuff that's really being embraced by the EMRs, really aggregating and predicting, you know, that predictive analytics side. There's a lot of let's look back in the chart and see how many things happened, but really being able to predict 12, 4, 12, 18 hours in advance, what's going to come up? What are the things that are going to potentially happen to this patient are really where a lot of the EMRs are going for
you,
sure.
you know, that also really speaks to how critical it is to document accurately.
Mm-hmm.
You know, something that nurses can fall into bad habits. Okay, I'll copy and paste, copy and paste is a help. It can be a helpful way to save time, but at the same time, if you're copying your own documentation that you have personally verified, but those can be slippery slopes. So if you're putting in there that, oh, wait, yeah, I did active range of motion every hour on this patient and you didn't actually do it, that would really mess up the AI aspect of predictive things because that's painting a completely different picture.
Or if you did real time chart, right? I mean, I think there's a lot around real time documentation that the AI is only as good as what's in there when it's in there. So if you go sit down at, and we've all had the days where we just didn't get charting done, right?
Right.
The days were crazy. If I don't get charting done, if I'm a nurse manager and I don't get scheduling done for the next shift, how is the AI going to then help predict what's happening? It's only good as what's in there. It can only automate so much if there's and so that's I think where some of the distrust comes from because they're like, well, that's not accurate. Well, was everything in there complete? And to your point, was it, updated and accurate? So
And it's not just your, like maybe yours is, but maybe the two nurses before you were not accurate. And then that would totally mess up the picture. But I could see like growing pains, but when that is at optimal like efficiency, how maybe that would save enough time where you can actually chart in real time. And if you're not double documenting,
yeah,
because Lord, why there's so many things that it's like, oh, well, for this compliance thing, you need to chart it here, and then you need to chart it 17 clicks over here, and then I'm going to audit you for not doing. And it's like, all right, if I could walk into a patient room and be like, Alexa, chart a normal assessment except for this, and this, and they have a time like how much
that's
time that
coming.
would save. God,
That's
oh,
coming. And there are physician trials where that is exactly what is happening. And it's saving time for the physicians and getting them doing less pajama time at the end of the day, so
yeah.
that's really a big burnout thing for physicians is anything that we can do for physicians to have them spending less time after hours doing chart reviews and chart documentation. The more you can put all that together, and that's not just AI. I mean, that's dictation, which then can drive into AI. There's a lot of tools that are being enabled for a lot of different types of clinicians with an AI lens to help save time.
Yeah, you think about the cognitive energy it has to take to like, okay, I've done this assessment, I've done or dressing change, whatever it is, on 5 or 7 different people, and then I need to go remember like to be able to in real
Yep.
time do something, it's
Yep.
accurately documented, and then you can go back to that reliable source, which is the chart and not my memory. Because
Yep.
like being able to say what happened or chart it immediately the accuracy is so much better than going at the end of the day. Wait, which patient was it that had crackles in their lung? I can't remember. And then you got to get up and you got to go listen to their lungs again. Like all of that, like the cognitive energy that must save. And then you're able to probably think critically about situations better because you're not like struggling to remember things, or like one of those barriers for me was like you're just constantly looking for time to chart and
Mhm.
constantly stressed that there's all these things I haven't charted and I can't the input of tasks that are coming towards me and requests, I can't like tackle them because I'm still in a backlog. So to like be pulled into real time in real time throughout the day, is this a dream?
Yeah, they I don't know if this is the latest research. I haven't looked in a while, but 35% of nurses' time spent documenting, and 60 to 80% of time of nurse managers is spent trying to figure out staffing and scheduling.
What a gigantic waste of time for someone with a master's degree or more
Right.
to be
Right.
scheduling.
Yep.
Like, I mean,
Yep.
and even if you have an assistant manager, still, like, I don't know. This just seems so archaic. I kind of feel like maybe this time before AI is fully integrated, optimized, and now we're working or integrated and then we're optimizing for like efficiency is almost like the 20 years before the car was invented and and everybody's still like on horses. Like this is just a period of time before cars. This is a period of time where we're struggling through to like not waste our time doing ridiculous things, physically inputting it into technology.
And I think what we need to do on the nursing side is we need to empower nurses to say, this is crazy. Do you realize how inefficient this is? And
Mhm.
raise their hand and say, I want to be part of a conversation around how to make our lives better on a shift by shift basis. And what can we do? How do we get them empowered? Um, our Compass survey said that there's that clinical people want to be more involved in decision making around technology, right? So how do we do that? How do we enable them to be have a seat at the table?
Yeah, I think that shared governance avenue is critical. I spent a lot of time in shared governance. I actually was the president, or not president, the chair of Charlotte Novant Health for a
Okay.
year,
Yeah.
where it was just where I was at the facility level and then in the market level.
Yeah.
And that's where you're really sitting next to decision makers and to be able to here is a problem. How can we are being asked to sign in at 13 things that, and while in that silo of scheduling and the silo of ordering meds, and that sounded great. Now you're asking the same end user to do all of it, empowering those bedside nurses to come to those meetings. Here are our problems. Let's articulate a solution and bring that to a decision maker. And also being able to say, this doesn't, yeah, like what you said, empower them to say, hey, you're asking us to do too much. You can't just dump everything on that end user and hope they'll figure it out. Like we're constantly being asked to do more and more things, but not given more time
Right.
and have to kind of figure it out. And that's why time management is such a nightmare for new nurses and experienced nurses because we're asked to do more and more. One little thing. Okay, here's one more thing you need to chart. Your heart failure education and write that down on top of all the other education you did. And it's in a very specific place because when this very specific person audits this that you
Yeah.
don't know, and then that happens 20 times in 3 years.
Yeah. Imagine automating care plans, Katie. Imagine
Oh,
getting some of that stuff in place. There's the requirement to do it, but then how do you automate it? And then all I have to do is go in and validate and confirm.
like
And
just
it's accurate because it's pulling everything that's accurate for the patient. You're not sitting there creating care plans that are just, objective documents that are irrelevant and actually aren't actionable.
that would, I mean, to say, okay, the patient is on oxygen, they have crackles in their lungs, they're getting duo nebs. All right, like, let's move, like, here we'll kind of come up with this specific care plan of like airway clearance and all that kind of stuff. Like, to have
It's
that
common.
just hold.
It's common and probably there, and I just don't know it. But yeah, that's where we're headed.
Oh, don't get me excited now. Are you going to make bedside nursing much more doable so we're not in it for 5 years and say I can't and then leave? Like, that would be incredible if these things made bedside nursing not so exhausting that you can't do it for 20 years. Like, so many people, I like this, but I'm being asked to do way too much and I'm just so exhausted to have that kind of support while also elevating the level of care. That sounds like, yeah, optimal. These nurses love taking care of patients. And one of the things I've noticed as like talking with newer nurses, the hard thing is this is the standard of care I want to provide.
Yep.
This is the time I'm only able to do this much. Because I don't have enough time, I can't give them the care that I think that I'm supposed to and that I ethically feel is appropriate because I just don't have enough time because I'm asked to do too much stuff.
So what if technology can enable some of that automation around the stuff that is down here so that they can be more of the up here part?
I think you're going to reduce burnout. I think you're going to reduce turnover and you're going to have better patient care. Like there's just so many things, there's so many benefits. And while there are risks, of course, and you want to cautiously proceed because there are patients and stuff, but like that kind of medical innovation is just, um, like the possibilities are quite remarkable, especially for a workforce that is so exhausted, but also hopeful, you know?
Right. And there's definitely considerations around AI. I mean, we'd be silly to think there aren't. I mean, you've got to remember that human touch is never going to go away.
Right.
You sitting at your patient's bedside and listening to them worry about their child because they can't be there with them, or the concerns they have about being able to get out of the hospital sooner. Like those conversations are never going to be automated with AI. There's ethical concerns, certainly. Like we've got to worry about data privacy. We've got to worry about bias with AI. I mean, these are in accountability. Like ethical use of AI is absolutely a thing. Education, right? How do you educate that AI is trustworthy? And then certainly like the other thing that I think about is implementing AI into existing workflows. So you can't just throw AI on top of something and assume it's going to fix the problem. You have to embed it in the workflow. And that takes kind of like re-implementing and reprocess, doing the process analysis of is the process working today, or are we just adding AI to it? Or do we need to optimize the process, which is what some of the things that we find at Symplr with our solutions is we can put AI in, but if you're doing paper schedules, it's not going to help you figure out who can pick up the shift. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh,
and
Jesus.
that's kind of the workflow stuff that really needs to be considered when you're talking about AI. Like it is a ground up in some cases redesign of workflow process for sure.
All right, so my last question, AI related.
Yeah.
You said earlier you have a family member who just, fresh in the nursing realm.
Yeah.
To imagine you're talking to that person 20 years into their career, in 20 years. What does their day-to-day look like compared to now with, let's say AI's been implemented to a pretty astonishing degree with appropriate safeguarding. What does that shift look like? Let's say they're on a med-surg unit in 20 years with AI fully implemented and optimized.
Well, I believe 20 years from now, a med-surg unit's going to be in the home because technology is going to be so advanced that you're going to have very little patients in. That's my hope, is that there's very few patients actually sitting in a brick and mortar hospital because technology, virtual nursing, virtual care, all of the things that can wrap around a patient being at home is really going to have um, change the way healthcare is. And it's, AI is going to be a big part of that because there's so much predictive analytics that we can know what that patient's going to do. Like I was mentioning, 12, 24, 36, a month from now, 2 months from now, to know whether they need to be in an acute bed or they can recover at home. That's really where I think 20 years from now is. Is that going to change emergency departments and MVAs? No. Is that going to change heart attacks? Maybe a little bit, but you're still going to have a cardiovascular ICU somewhere. But I think that there's going to be a large patient population that's going to be able to be managed at home. And there's a lot of organizations right now that are very, very focused on hospital at home care, where it's truly a patient who meets criteria to be inpatient that are in their own personal home, and they're having virtual nurses, virtual physician, hospitalists round on them just like they would sitting in a med-surg bed. So I think 20 years from now, we're far past what's AI doing for us, and we're on to the next horizon. I don't know, maybe everybody's got a chip in them and we're tracking them, which will freak everybody out that I said that. But it's like, my dogs all have microchips and they know everything about them. Maybe that's where we are in 20 years. I'm sure people won't like that I said that.
That would be quite a different world we'd be living in for sure.
But I think we need to think about that. I think we need to think about how do we disrupt healthcare so that nurses who are in school today have a better experience than what you and I had, right?
Yeah.
Or what those nurses that are in the bedside today have. There's never going to not be a need for nurses, but the burnout, the turnover, and the just sharp decline that we're going to have in nurses in the workforce, we've got to get creative and we've got to disrupt how healthcare is delivered.
Ooh, that'll be interesting to see how that plays out for sure. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about your informatics background, just for our listeners who are interested in it. So can you tell us a little bit about your nursing journey and what inspired you to get into informatics and what your educational pathway was to it?
Yeah. So I was a pediatric critical care nurse by background. I spent 5 years at the bedside charting on paper. For those of you listeners who don't know what that means and how to do it, I had a paper chart. They went up in the rack above the desk at the unit clerk. There was big racks that had all the charts, and some patients were there forever and they had multiple charts. Anyway, I'm really dating myself, but we were converting from paper to an early version of an EMR, and I got tapped to be a trainer, like a super user, which I thought was pretty cool. And then I was a support super user for our go live. And not long after that, which I actually loved, because I thought that's when I learned how to real-time document. I was out of my shift, Katie, before 7:30 at night. 7 a to 7 p, I was out because I had a little laptop. I took it room to room. I did all my charting while I was in there. And then not long after that, I was asked if I wanted to work on the next phase of the EMR, which was getting rid of care planning, education, and discharge planning stuff. And this is honest to God's truth, and I tell everybody who asks me this. The only question I asked them was, did I have to work nights and weekends? And they said no. And I said, when can I start? Like, that was I didn't have this big epiphany that I wanted to work in technology. I just really thought it was pretty cool and thought maybe if I don't have to work a P weekend, I'd be okay. So that was the way I left the bedside, very unceremoniously. But since then, so that was early 2000s. And since then, I've just been all in on technology and how technology, this is not my saying, but the right technology for the right nurse at the right time. And that's really what is the most important thing to me, and really what I did when I did 15 years of implementing electronic medical records at organizations, working for the organization, and then now on the vendor side, I have the great honor of sitting between our customer base and our product teams, and I get to hear what the pain points are and then say, how can we solve this in our solution? Because again, we are one solution that nurses and nurse managers are touching of how many in a day? A lot. Right? We're talking 12 or 13. I don't know that it's that many, but it's more than it needs to be. So that was kind of my journey along the way. My education path was actually kind of backwards from what it should have been. So I'm a diploma grad from a nursing college. And then I got my bachelor's in healthcare administration, all while I was in informatics. And then I went back and got my master's later. So, and now I'm noodling on getting my doctorate.
Very exciting.
So we'll see. But yeah, that was my career. My degree is master's in nursing informatics at this point.
Nice. And you are a CNIO. And please, for those nurses out there who don't know what that means, can you tell us what that means?
Yeah, so it's a Chief Nursing Informatics Officer. So in your healthcare organization, not everybody has a CNIO. Your CNO might serve that role, but it's kind of an up and coming role. But the CNIO either reports to the Chief Information Officer or the Chief Nursing Officer. And what their job is in a healthcare setting, in a healthcare system, is to be that liaison, right? So I was talking about how I get to talk to customers and product. They get to talk to nurses, physicians, OT, speech, and then take it back to the IT team and say, either this solution you implemented isn't working right, or the bedside staff need this solution. So when we were talking about shared governance, there could be people under the CNIO who sit in those shared governance councils. We had a technology council. You'd probably want somebody on your education council who has an understanding of technology to know where can we make things better. So there's really a structure in most organizations around technology and informatics. Then on my side, like I said, what my role is, but some CNIOs are very focused on software implementations, and some are very focused on data and analytics. And they're both, the answer is yes to both of them. So as I'm looking at our data lakes and data information, making sure that that is then served up to the right users, like the CNO has the right kind of access and the bedside nurse has the right kind of access, and that the data makes sense to them and that it's accurate, right? We were talking about it's only as good as what you put in. So making sure that it's reliable data and predictive analytics.
Yeah, like with patients, it's like if I have the blood pressure cuff wrong and I am doing the art line isn't zeroed and I'm gonna get crap garbage in, and that's gonna not make people enable physicians and providers to make appropriate clinical decisions. So same thing there, but in a more zoomed out capacity, I'm assuming, like
Yep,
a system level instead of
correct.
individual level.
And then standardizing across the system, that's a big part of the CNIO's position, especially now where we have nurses floating so often because of the shortages. You can't expect a nurse, whether it's from a scheduling and staffing solution or from a EMR technology solution or a nurse call system or a bedside monitor, you can't expect them to be able to adapt that quickly. Like there need to be some standards that I know that when this alarm goes off on this floor, it's the same as when that alarm goes off
Mhm.
on that floor. And it's not, it could be VTAC here, it could be just a, regular sinus arrhythmia over there. Like who knows what it is, but it needs to be the same kind of audible tone. Those types of things are really
Yeah,
important.
and I think when you're a newer nurse or you're at the bedside and you're very focused on the bedside, having understanding of how big of a lift all of that is, and to make the bedside as seamless as possible, and even just having advocates at that high level in an organization's hierarchy to enable that to happen. Like that
Right.
was one of the things when I started working or was part of the shared governance thing was like, oh, implementing anything on such a large scale is a massive undertaking, and I very much underestimated it, because when you're at that bedside you're like, well, we just need to do this and we just need to do this, well, we just get this. Well, actually, if we do that, then there's 20,000 other implications from that we need to consider, and hospitals are huge,
Yeah.
especially when we're talking about ones that are implementing this brand new technology and things like that. I'm assuming those are larger organizations that are like research based. So those change implementation has to be pretty thoughtful, and it is a huge undertaking.
Yeah, and again, not my words, but people, process, and technology, right? The technology is usually the smallest sliver of that whole change management. The people in the process is the harder part than the technology implementation.
That makes so much sense. And then
Yep.
yeah, we're nurses and we're stuck in our ways, and but we're trying to help the nurses stuck in their ways have a much easier time, and it's Lord bless you. Thank you for all that you do.
Yeah. Thank them. Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Ali. This is so interesting.
Yeah,
And I'm
Katie,
very
it's been great. It's so fun. I love being at this stage in healthcare. I mean, there's a lot of day-to-day frustrations in healthcare, but I think the future is really bright, and I'm excited for what's going to come in the next few years.
it's wonderful to talk to optimistic people who have their pulse on how things are evolving at such a pace, and to have that optimism. Especially I think that's very important for the newer people who are
Yes.
just getting into the field, and they've heard the nurses eat their young and this and that and how hard it is, but to have have an optimistic perspective, I think, is critical for all of us, but especially them. So thank you.
Yes, I would ask your listeners, please hold on. It's coming. It's going to get better. That's what I just keep, I told you about my nephew. He's too new to know what he's what he's in the middle of, but
Right.
yeah, I'm excited for where we're going, and I think it's going to be a great ride.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Katie.
And that's it for today's episode. I hope you walk away from it feeling a little more informed, a little more excited, maybe, how AI can possibly support you and not replace the human side of nursing. I mean, my best case scenario is all of the like super tasky things I don't have to like put critical thought into can be offloaded to AI. Like, I would love that so that I can focus on critical thinking. But we'll see how it all unfolds. I'm excited to see it. I hope I'm still doing this podcast in 10 years and I can say, hey, look what happened and what we were talking about back in 2025 and where we are now in 2035. Yikes. So big thanks to Ali for breaking this all down with clarity, making it succinct and understandable. So if you're loving the podcast, it would mean a lot if you left a rating and a review. It helps more nurses find these conversations, and it's just a free way to support it. And don't forget, if you are deciding on a nursing program, or even if you're not, but you know that in the future you want to do that, check out that nursing school workbook at freshrn.com/planner. And once you sign up for it, I'll give you some great emails to help with that decision making after you sign up. And remember, if you're working on prepping for the NCLEX, that 20% off at truelearn.com. FreshRN is my promo code. Get that 20% off. And make sure you check out my updated list of top programs. So thanks for listening, nurses, and stay fresh.